Hello, welcome to another edition of Outside Michigan Politics with Alan Sanborn. Today, our show is a very important show. October 20th, 2007 was a day, the worst day that a parent can have. Young Ryan Rudolph was a student. He was on the swim team. He was at times, his dad describes, as a bit of a handful, but not a bad student. And Ryan got involved in drugs, and he overdosed on October 20th in 2007, a parent's worst nightmare. He died from that overdose. Today we have Judge Linda Davis from Mount Clemens, and we have Ryan's father, Mark Rudolph, to discuss a very important program that they're involved in, and it's Families Against Narcotics. Mark, tell us about Ryan.
To me, he was pretty typical. I mean, he was fun. He cared about people. He was kind of an average student, maybe a little bit above average in terms of academics. But like I said, he could be a handful. He flew a plane. He was on the swim team. We loved to go fishing. I considered him my fishing buddy and my golf partner. And you know what changes? I don't know. You know, I remember Ryan calling me up one day and telling me that he had an Oxycontin problem, and I kind of was like, Oxycontin problem? I mean, I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't, and oof, we were off to the races. I mean, at that point, Ryan was an addict, and I didn't see it coming. I mean, it's one of the characteristics, I think, of the prescription drugs that these kids are using to start their addiction with. I mean, they have no idea where it's going to lead them, and as for a parent, it's much harder to detect.
Tell us about that day, October 20th, 2007. What happened?
Well, actually, I was in Cincinnati. His mother, we're divorced, but his mother came home from vacation in Arizona. She got off the plane, turned her phone on, and there was a message left on her phone telling us where we could find his body. He had gotten out of jail the day before, was supposed to go to a 14-month rehab program, but instead ran down to Detroit one more time, and he died. And they rolled him up in a blanket and dumped him in a vacant lot.
And he was just getting ready to go into rehab.
He was court-ordered to a 14-month rehab program, correct. They let him out a day early.
Judge Linda Davis, you've been on the bench for some time now.
11 years.
11 years, and you've seen the story time and time again. And you got involved in the program FAN.
Correct.
That's an acronym. What does it stand for?
It stands for Families Against Narcotics, and it's a community-based program where community leaders, parents, young recovering addicts, sometimes addicts that are using even, have come together to try to make a difference and to change the way people look at drug use, to change the face of addiction. It used to be, Alan, that we looked at a heroin addict as being a street person that lived underneath the bridge in Detroit. That's no longer the case. They're the kid next door. These are good kids. Most of the time are honor students, do very well in school, oftentimes are athletes. And just like when we were kids, kids experimented with drinking. Kids are now experimenting with drugs, thinking that they're safe because doctors prescribe them, and they think that they're using a safe alternative, and it takes hold of their life and destroys it.
You know, when I was a probation officer, and I did that for 20 years, that's how we first got to know you. You were an attorney at the time.
I was.
That's how we got to know each other. And but we could see the kids. They were coming predominantly from broken families. Probably 80 to 85% of my caseload were broken families. You would see the academic deterioration. And you would see the kids start to dabble in substance abuse, and you could almost predict that the kids would drop out of high school. And so you could see the basic identifying factors. We're not seeing that now, though.
No, that's not the case. This is a drug that is taking a hold in every family. Most of the kids that we work with, like I said, are honor students. Many of them are living in both parents are together. They're living in intact families. They are good students. Teachers will rave about, oh my gosh, I never thought I'd see this child using drugs. He's not somebody I would have targeted. Athletes, people that we can tell you story after story of young athletes who had signed with the Red Wings, who were doing world-class soccer meets all over the country, the world, who ended up on Vicodin because of sports injuries. It got a hold of them and took off, and their lives have been ruined.
Yeah, and we know that athletics and academics, keeping your kids' idle time limited, keeping their time structured, is a great way to keep kids on a positive path. But you're seeing kids that are good students, that are athletes, involved in these sorts of programs.
Yeah, I mean, and I've said this before, that if you think for a moment that somehow you're exempt or your kids are exempt from this, you're wrong. I mean, this can happen to anybody. I mean, I don't care race, religion, social or economic status, kids' intelligence. In some ways, the intelligence and wealth is almost a negative because they both think that they can outsmart this and they have money at their disposal to start their use. But again, it literally is anybody out there.
The statistics show that approximately 85% of kids in the 10th grade admit to using some form of illegal prescription drug at some point. That's 10th grade.
We're not talking marijuana.
No, we're talking illegal prescription drugs.
Define that.
Well, they could be legal for you. You may have gotten Vicodin for an injury that you had, but if a child goes in and they take that pill, it wasn't prescribed to them, it's an illegal narcotic at that point. If they're busted with those pills, it's illegal. So, and all of these Vicodin, oxycodone, Xanax, there's 265 drugs that are on the market that are what we call heroin light. They're synthetic heroin, and people when they're taking those drugs really don't realize that they're taking an opiate that is a synthetic form of heroin.
You told me Vicodin is synthetic heroin.
It is.
Wild. Okay, Ryan was at Fraser High School.
Right.
He passed away.
Right.
Drug overdose. You got involved in FAN.
Correct.
Tell us about the program.
Well, the superintendent of schools, the DARE officer, and the chief of police, all in Fraser, organized a community meeting. We met in the basement of the church across the street from the high school, and at that meeting there was probably somewhere around 80 very angry people, including me. And I mean, I was angry with me, his mom, Ryan, courts, rehab, you name it, I'm angry. But the unique thing that happened there, because we were all looking for something that we could do different, something to kind of stop this from happening. We knew we were losing kids. Ryan and Kyle were like the 8th and 9th kids from the area that had died. And we had some people in recovery, some young people in recovery, and a couple of those stood up and said, give us a chance. Let us go talk to your kids. And Rick, the superintendent at the time, within a month we were in the Fraser High Schools. We've been there ever since. This year I think we're in 9 different schools. And we just share our stories.
And you were working at a St. Ronald's Church? Is this where this started out, over in Fraser?
No, actually this... yeah, United Methodist Church. It's right on Garfield Road, right straight across the street from the high school.
Okay, and I mean, how prevalent is this? We're not just talking about 9 or 10 kids in the metro area over the past couple of years. You told me some staggering statistics.
Yeah. We go into the schools and we'll talk, and usually somewhere in that hour, we try to take over health class for the day, so we got 25, 30 kids at a time, and we're in there sharing our stories. Recovering addicts and myself and other parents will go in and share our stories. And somewhere in there, somebody will ask the question, how many of you guys know somebody that's doing an opiate? And you'll get 80, 90, probably close to 90% of the students will raise their hand. Now that doesn't mean that they're doing it, but they know somebody that is. And again, that, you know, what we try to do, one of the things we try to do is connect the dots between the Percocets, the Darvocets, the Oxycontins, the Vicodins, and the day that shoving a needle in your arm makes sense. Because that's how it happens. There isn't any, I haven't met a kid yet who grew up and said, you know, I think when I grow up I want to be an addict. That's not what happens. These are good kids from good families, loving families, who find themselves in a situation they never imagined.
The other thing too, Ellen, is There are a lot of parents that are in the same boat that Mark is in.
Yeah.
We are aware of over 300 families in the local area that have lost their children to addiction. In Pinckney,
300 families
Mhm.
in the Metro Detroit area over the past couple of years.
right.
Yeah.
And those numbers are low because those are only the ones that we hear about. There are many of them that are reported as respiratory failure or accidental death. So the number is probably way above that. That's just through our dealings what we know is going on out there. In examples, in Lapeer they had 14 kids, 8 confirmed heroin deaths, the other one suspected opiate deaths that occurred in a 1-year period of time. In Pinckney, they only have a 5,000 population. They had 12 kids in 1 year that died of opiate overdose. We hear numbers like this. In one small community in Dearborn had over 40 kids that died in a year period of time of opiate overdose. This isn't something that's happening on small volumes, but nobody is talking about it. Parents are ashamed. There's a stigma to it, like, oh, a drug addict, you must be a bad parent. But that's not the case. I'm going to tell you, we work with almost 300 families just in Fan alone that come in and out of our doors on a regular basis. And I'll tell you, I would put any of those parents up against any other parent as far as their parenting skills, the love of their children, and trying to do the right thing to raise their kids with good values, good morals. This is something kids are experimenting with. It is the new drinking that's out there, and it's easy to get their hands on, and they're dying.
And Judge Mark Rudolph, you have brought with you a couple of volunteers from the program, a couple of courageous young men who are going to come on the show now, and they're going to kind of shatter that stigma that these are just really bad kids that get involved in drugs, and the next thing you know, they're out stealing and so on and so on. These are kids just like yours and mine that got involved in drugs and now have gotten involved in the FAN program, and we're going to talk to those two young men, so stay tuned. We're back on Outside Michigan Politics, and we're talking about the FAN program, Family Against Narcotics, and here's what makes the program innovative. You know, we talked earlier how the stigma of these kids being from broken families, academic failure, not involved in sports, some key things that we watched for when I was an old probation officer. Well, now I'm just old. But anyway, we have two young men that are going to tell us a little bit about what makes this program innovative. And they were both from some pretty good families, pretty good students, honor roll students. Andrew, you were an honor roll student at De La Salle High School, of all places, one of our finest academic institutions in Macomb County. Tell us how you got involved with drugs.
It started when I was a sophomore in the back of an honors English class. A few of the guys in the back asked me if I knew where to get some marijuana, and I kind of looked at them and just said, yeah, I didn't know anything. I wasn't smoking marijuana at the time, and went home, got it for him, and I started selling it. And then the bright idea came into my head that I should just be smoking it, and I started smoking it, and I started hanging out with kids around my neighborhood in Warren, and that led into taking Adderall. I was never prescribed any Adderall or Vicodin or Xanax myself, and after I tried Adderall the first time, I kept trying it, I kept buying it. I found my friends from Warren that had it, and whoever they were getting it from, I met up with them, and I got that, and then Adderall moved on to Vicodin, and Vicodin took me to Xanax, which was my drug of choice, and the Xanax was an everyday thing. Every day I had to be on it. If I wasn't, I had a really short temper. I'd be worrying about what's going to go on, and I'd be freaking out. I was going insane. And when I would take the Xanax, I would black out for hours at a time. I wouldn't know what I was doing, where I was going, who I was with. And when I took it, I ended up stealing $1,500 from my parents. And they're always good parents. Nothing ever made me be mad at them or do anything against them. It's just after a while I started to not have any money, and when I took the Xanax and blacked out, the money was there, and I didn't know exactly what I was doing because I wasn't in control of myself, being under the influence of another substance. and stole their money, and ended up using that money to get high. And that spun me out of control into other drugs I've never even imagined I'd see myself doing. I would go on school, kept getting worse and worse for me. My grades were always pretty straight, and around senior year, I ended up blacking out in class, passed out, hit the floor, and woke up in the counseling office of De La Salle, and they ended up expelling me. I had to go to Warren Woods Tower for the last 6 months of my high school career, and ended up still getting high every day. Would not go to school at this point, would skip school, would be getting high in school, drinking in school, and still I didn't think I had a problem. I thought it was because I was a young man, that it was just something that happens to everybody. You know, I had a good family. I was going to a private school that costed a lot of money, raised Catholic, that, you know, it's just another phase of my life and I'll get over it. And it kept getting worse, though. I kept getting high and drinking and partying, stealing. I got arrested for having marijuana on me. I was put on probation in Warren. And after that, I kept getting high. That didn't scare me at all. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and after I violated probation 3 times, it got into my head that maybe I have a problem. My parents would be there asking me if I needed help, but I would kind of shove them to the side, and, you know, it's still in my head that I didn't have a problem, that I was just, you know, going through a hard time, like I said. And I ended up going to Brighton Treatment Center in November last year, 2010. And it was a little different for me. I got there and everyone is talking about heroin and a lot of drugs I hadn't experienced, and using the needle and shooting it up, and death. A lot of young guys dying, and it was weird for me. And I was there for only 10 days, and I got out and I stayed clean, and I thought I was serious about recovery. And they told me to go to meetings, NA meetings or AA meetings, and I did. And within about 2 months, I ended up drinking again because my problem was pills. I didn't think drinking would lead me back to anything, and I picked up that drink, and within a week I was snorting heroin now. I'd never snorted heroin before, and just by picking up that first drink, it got my emotions and my thoughts and my ideas all came back about the drugs, and everything spiraled out of control even faster than before. I ended up getting kicked out of my parents' house because they caught me stealing from their room. They would lock the doors. They would lock the refrigerator in the basement, chain it up because of all the alcohol I was stealing from them. My brothers and sisters, they didn't want anything to do with me. I was stealing from them as well. And so when I got kicked out, I moved in with one of my best friends, and his family kind of took me in. And within a few days, I was kicked out of his house, and for stealing from his parents. I didn't have anywhere to go. I lost my job. I pretty much stopped going to school because I couldn't handle getting high every day. Getting high was my full-time job now. And there was nothing left for me. I didn't have anything. I didn't have a mother or father anymore. I didn't have my twin sister. I didn't have my 2 older brothers. I didn't have any friends, no money. From getting high for the past 3 years and drinking, it felt like all my education, all my knowledge that I gained was lost or put to waste into something that had no point. And it was at that point when I realized I didn't have anything left, that this might actually be the wrong thing. And I went back to Brighton, and I stayed there for 22 days this time, and I got out on March 30th, and I moved into a 3-quarter house, which is a house with other recovering addicts and alcoholics, a men's house. And now I've been sober for 7 months. I have a job back. I have my family back, you know. It's getting there. It's not, the trust isn't fully there yet, but it is slowly coming back. it was just hard sometimes, though, when I was getting high, and I'd come into the house and I'd see my parents or my mom would be up after kicking me out and not being there for a few days at a time, and I'd come home and she'd be standing there crying in her pajamas because it's 3 in the morning, and my dad just was already asleep. He didn't know what to do with me anymore. He didn't want to deal with it, and my mom would be crying to me in the kitchen, and I'd be high, and she'd ask me why I kept doing what I was doing, and I couldn't give her a good answer, and it was just because I wanted to get high.
And you told me you're from a family, an intact family. Your parents have been married for 25 years and really went the extra mile by sending you to De La Salle, giving you and your siblings a private education.
Correct.
Unbelievable. Congratulations on your sobriety so far, one day at a time.
Thank you.
We're going to go to another county, Churchill High School. We've got a student here. He was a 3.4 GPA, and he was an athlete on the soccer team at Churchill High School in Livonia. Tell us about when you first started to use Matt.
Okay, I first started to use at the age of 12 or 13. It was around middle school. I was experimenting with Vicodin, and when I broke my ankle, I got prescribed to it. And after that, you know, I started getting a feel for it because all my brother was doing it, and he said it was cool and stuff like that, so I started doing it. Well, when I got to high school, it was 3 days in the freshman year. When I was 14, I tried my first hit of heroin, and I was pretty much off to the races from then. You know, I thought I found my first love, and I used all through high school. It didn't really affect me like that much because, you know, I was still getting good grades and everything like that, and all my friends were doing it, so I thought it was okay. I really did, and I never really suffered any consequences during high school. You know, I mean, my parents would, you know, catch me. I would overdose, but they never really, you know, kicked me out or anything like that. And so, you know, I thought I didn't have a problem, you know. And when I first realized I had a problem is when I got kicked out of high school 3 weeks away from graduation, and which didn't really affect me that much and stuff because, you know, I still got my diploma. But, you know, and then, you know, the bad things started happening. Like my friends started dying, and people close to me started just fading away, slowly fading away, and I was literally homeless in Detroit for a year and a half, and right then and there I had to get help. That was the first time where I actually saw the light of recovery, and I wanted a different life. I was sick of my old ways, and I was tired of being sick and tired. I really was, and I wanted a different life, and now I'm actually enjoying a very, very wonderful life. You know, good things are starting to happen to me for like the first time in my life, and I realize that I really do not need this drugs in my life, and it is a blessing where I'm at today, and I'm very, very, very happy I'm actually here alive because I had a lot of close deaths, and I overdosed a few times, and I would literally stop breathing for 10 minutes one time, and that was very, very scary. But, you know, you would think that would maybe, you know, tell me to get clean, but it really, really didn't. You know, I mean, it's just I actually wanted to do more after that, and I was a very, very sick person.
Matt and Andy, you boys both knew, and you're 18 years old and you're 22 years old. You're not boys, but to me, you're young men. You both know young people who've died from drugs.
Yes.
And you said you had been to jail before, or been on probation?
Yeah, just on probation. I never really experienced jail. When I got arrested, I was just in jail for the night. But it was still the fact that nobody in my family had ever gone through that, being locked up or arrested. So having to call them from the jail cell and be calling them every 15 minutes, begging them to come get me for like $100 to bail me out, and they're like, we're coming to get you when we come to get you, you know, and it kind of was like, this really sucks right now. And I got out and I still continue to get high, and I didn't have enough, like Matthew said. I was just sick. It got to the point where I was sick and tired of stealing from everybody and losing everything I had and just freely giving everything I got myself away. And now that I'm sober, it's a good thing to be able to get all this back and actually enjoy having it and be happy without having to get high.
Similar story for you, Matt. Were you on probation as well?
Yes, I was, but no, how sick I was and stuff, I did not want to do probation and stuff. I would actually tell the judge to give me 90 days in jail instead, because I would rather actually take 90 days in jail of not using than a whole year of probation of not using. You know, I mean, I did 9 days in Isabella County, and I did 6 months in Wayne County in downtown, and it got to a point where jail didn't really bother me. I didn't care, because when I was homeless, it was kind of like a win-win situation for me. All right, if I get caught stealing or whatever, I got a roof over my head, I get meals and stuff, and if I do get away from stealing, I get my drugs. So I mean, at a point, you know, I mean, that's how sick my mind was. It really was.
This is some real honesty coming out here. Judge, what role do these young men play in the FAN program?
They're vital to the program. Our take on this is that young kids don't listen to adults. They listen to their peers. It's how they got in this mess. It's how we get them out of it. And so them talking to the young people, they listen to them a lot more than they listen to us. And I'll tell you, the other thing is we learn a lot from these young men as well. They made some incredible points right now. Is a lot of judges think the answer is to throw people in jail, and all they do while they're in jail is sit there and wait to get out so they can go use again. That's what Mark's son did. He went in, and they made the mistake of giving him a window that he could get out before he got treatment. It's treatment that cures. It's not jail. Statistics are huge that jail time just does not work for addiction. It's treatment and being involved in the community and giving back that helps them stay on the road to recovery, and both of these young men are evidence of that.
And these are young men. We also have young women that are in the same boat, that offer up and help us, help others as well.
Can you talk briefly about the DARE program? I know you don't want to compare your programs, but the DARE program services youngsters.
Right, and I think that is the issue, is they talk about it when they're in elementary school, and then we don't talk about it anymore. And that's a big problem. At least that's what we see it as. I mean, DARE does a good thing. I mean, it certainly reaches some kids, but there are other kids that are slipping through the cracks.
Okay, well, hard to believe we've run out of time today. Matt and Andy, you guys stay strong, and you're serving an important mission now, and that's to work with young people so that you can communicate the importance of what you've lost and now what you've gained in your sobriety. Mark, our condolences at the loss of your son, and wish you all the best to help work with young people with the FAN program. And our Judge Linda Davis, what a pleasure to have you on the show to take you away from your busy docket. But I know that you are totally into this program, the Families Against Narcotics program. And is there anything more that you'd like to say?
Just that this program works, and to the parents that are sitting out there that think this can happen to you, education is key, and don't sit and wait until it happens to get an education. Come and listen to our program and find out what you need to know up front. And then if you do find yourself in this situation, or if you are in this situation, come and get the support you need from our group. We have wonderful families that are willing to sit down and talk to you and help you get through this process.
And we do have an email for the program and a phone number for the Families Against Narcotics program, and I know that John Martin, as we speak, is posting that up on the right underneath us. So if you need to contact the Families Against Narcotics program, John Martin, I hope that you've had a chance to put that up. Well, this is a tremendously important issue. Young people using narcotics, and we've kind of broken the mold that these kids can come from really good homes, from intact families, not where we typically used to see this. But it's an important issue that we've brought up here on Outside Michigan Politics. I'm Alan Sanborn. Thanks very much for watching.